Patrick, welcome to the show.
It's always a pleasure to be on your show.
Patrick, before we move on and talk about the political affairs of the Tamil people and your stance on a lot of those stuff, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to, first of all, congratulate you on a wonderful and a very deserved win as the PC leader of the Ontario PC Party. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Raghavan.
On the 10th of May, the Toronto Sun put out a headline calling Brown is the new blue. As you will know, it has two connotations. One, Patrick Brown is the leader of the PC Party, and then, of course, amongst ourselves, we call ourselves the Brown people. You may have knowingly or not knowingly brought in a large sum of brown people into the fold. And again, once again, congratulations for making that happen.
Well, Raghavan, I have to say that the support from the Tamil Canadian community of my candidacy of the Indo-Canadian community was something that was unparalleled in our party's history in terms of the sheer volumes, and it's something. It's a type of friendship and support that I will never forget as long as I live.
Patrick, you've been a very strong supporter of the Tamils and the Tamil cause as well. You've been voicing for the Tamil people for a very long time. Now that you're moving on to provincial politics, should we be worried that you no longer have the time or energy to do this?
No, it's always going to be a passion of mine. I don't think there's any jurisdiction when it comes to justice or human rights. I believe every public official should be advocating for justice and human rights, and whether that is as a member of parliament or whether that is leader of the opposition in Ontario, I will use every tool I can to shine a light on human rights abuses and for the need to justice, and particularly because the diaspora in Canada, Tamil community, is quite large, and it's quite large in Ontario. Frankly, I think the government of Ontario should view it as one of its incumbent duties to be that voice, to be that advocate as strong as possible. And frankly, I feel we haven't been robust enough as a province of Ontario speaking out on the horrors of the genocide.
Right. So I'm sure we can all be confident that you will continue to be our strong voice. Now, Patrick, you have taken a very strong position by calling it a genocide when many other people were reluctant to do so. What gave you that kind of an empowerment to come out bold and strong and go out to the House of Commons and call it a genocide?
Well, it's education. I believe anyone that knows the facts, anyone that has well-researched this realizes that it was a genocide. And, my history on the issue dates back to 2009 when I had the first family in my office crying on my couch telling me what happened. But what I learned, whether it was going to Geneva, whether it was screening the Channel 4 documentary, the more work I did on the file, the more I realized this wasn't just war crimes. This just wasn't just human rights abuses, but it was a genocide. And frankly, it's always been my belief that when dictators can sweep it under the carpet and say, "Oh, this was just, the conflicts of war," or it's almost like they get away with it. I really believe that history's greatest criminals need to be known as that. History's greatest criminals need to go down in the history books for their acts of evil. And it took some time after the Second World War for the world to truly appreciate the horrors of the Nazi genocide. And I realize it's taking some time for the world to truly appreciate the horrors of what happened in the genocide in Sri Lanka. But the more that our community works to highlight and shine a light on what happened, the sooner we'll see that appreciation. And especially since the Rajapaksa regime is defeated, I realize some of the elements are still in government, but the fact that regime is defeated, I think more information will come out. The more information that comes out, the stronger that case is going to be for a global recognition that a genocide took place.
Patrick, you speak about Rajapaksa regime, and it was during the Rajapaksa regime that you had a run-in with that regime, and you were trying to go to Sri Lanka to do some fact-finding. Tell us about that.
Well, this is back in 2009, and in my previous riding of Barrie, I had a family that was crying about what was happening to the relatives, and I could just tell they were genuine. You can't fake tears, and I felt that I needed. My heart told me that I had to go and investigate. So I bought a ticket to go to Sri Lanka, applied for my visa, and at the time I was, I was curious, but I wasn't convinced what was happening there. I felt a duty to investigate, but I wasn't convinced of the facts, and that's when my visa was turned down to visit Sri Lanka. And I said to myself, why would a government deny a parliamentarian's visa? Why would a government say that I'm not permitted to go to an IDP camp unless they're hiding something? And that was the moment in 2009 when I realized I'm not dealing with some slight human rights abuses. There's something really, really bad happening there, and that motivated my further involvement. And frankly, that's when I got to know a lot of the Tamil Canadian community, because they made a mistake to think when my visa got turned down I would just go away. Mm-hmm. Instead, for me, it was a message that this is going to be my cause in Ottawa, and I'm going to make them pay for not allowing justice to come out.
The Prime Minister of the country, Right Honourable Stephen Harper, has been one of the strongest voices in the international stage for the Sri Lankan Tamils, especially about the human rights abuses in Sri Lanka. The former Foreign Affairs Minister, John Baird, has been very vocal. Defence Minister now has released a very touching statement that he stands by the Tamil people on the 18th of May and during other days when we remember what happened in Mullivaikkal in 2009. Now, all of this came about because of people like you trying to bring in some awareness within the House of Commons. Now, tell us what you did after that 2009 visa rejection and how you brought this into the House of Commons. Again, some of us already know about this, but it is more for general awareness, because the Tamil people in Canada certainly need to know the Canadian government is by their side.
Well, it started with a statement in the House of Commons. I'll be honest, Raghavan, when I first embarked upon this, I was getting some pushback. People were saying, Patrick, you got to be careful. Why are you going out on the lawn of Parliament Hill? What I found particularly rewarding is this is an example of how democracy works. I remember when I went out to the lawn in 2009, there might have been one or two Conservative MPs who went out to the lawn, and there was a real hesitation to get involved. What I found as we started to speak in the House of Commons on this, as we did the Channel 4 movie night that I organized, we started to get more MPs involved. We got some from Midland, some from Kitchener-Waterloo. It just grew, and it went from having 2 MPs engaged to 15 to 45 to 80, and it was... You saw the power of democracy, because I remember when Lawrence Cannon, who was the Foreign Minister, goes to me, Patrick, you might be onto something. I'm going to raise this at the Commonwealth Conference in Trinidad and Tobago. I realized, we're making progress. But one of my proudest moments in Ottawa was when John Baird and the Prime Minister told me that they were going to, because we had pushed it, we were leaning on them to do the boycott of the Commonwealth in Sri Lanka. And when they finally told me they were going to do it, I'm like, yes, this shows and this proves that engagement works. And the community's activism not only has worked, we've changed the country's position. Canada went from 2007 to not necessarily being on the side of the Tamil community to here in 2013 and 14 being the world's greatest critic of the human rights abuses in Sri Lanka. So for me, it was one of my favorite moments in Ottawa.
Apart from partisan lines, obviously this is not a partisan issue. How did you work with the opposition MPs or people, your colleagues in the House of Commons?
Well, to be honest, it wasn't a partisan issue at all. I've done work with Rafika and NDP MP on this. I've done work with a former Liberal MP, Jimmy Karajanis, who's now a city councillor. He actually joined me when I went to Geneva to make a speech on behalf of the government of Canada. Human rights, justice are not issues where partisan politics apply.
Right. We're listening to Patrick Brown, the PC leader, Ontario PC leader, talking to us about the Tamil political issues and how he was involved in all of this. Listeners can call in and chat with Patrick Brown as well. Patrick, you're in Barrie now, I take it.
No, I'm down in Toronto.
You're in Toronto. Okay. It is very touching to know that you in Barrie you have a very small Tamil community. From there, you've become one of the most outspoken voices for the Tamil community in the entire GTA and across the country. You tell us what you think should be, or what do you think is the possible resolution to this Tamil grievances, in your view?
Well, a lot of people in foreign affairs are trying to say that everything's okay because Rajapaksa's out. I've been the contrarian in this. As people were elated in Ottawa thinking it's over, I've been the one who sort of put a little bit of rain on that parade. I've said that as much as Rajapaksa is out, many of the people who were involved in those final acts of genocide in the Battle of Muli Vaikal are still there. They are still in the Sri Lankan government. And when you have human rights criminals in the government, the battle is not over. We still have much work to do to make sure those thugs are out of government. And frankly, I don't think we're going to have real peace until the Tamil community in Sri Lanka can have their own homeland. And so, I guess my perspectives may be a little bit different than the consensus in the global community who believe there can be reconciliation within Sri Lanka. I just feel there's been too much damage, too much hate that you can't have reconciliation within the existing political structures. I really believe it would have to be something where the Tamil people finally have their own homeland within Sri Lanka.
You've been working with a lot of Tamils over the years, and what is your perspective of what Tamils here can do to expedite possible?
I think the message has worked in Canada. We have a government that is now on side, and the Canadian government will be a voice. I think, frankly, what we need to do is we need 10 Canadas. We need Australia. We need the UK. We need India. We need the other countries who are going to be at the UN or G20 meetings who have a strong voice to also share Canada's criticism. And so, I believe that's important. So if people have relatives abroad, if people have friends abroad in different countries, follow the Canadian model of engagement. The fact is, it worked in Canada.
People were critical, the Tamil people especially were critical of the government in 2009 because pretty much the whole world sat and watched what was happening to the Tamils at that time with no direct engagement of any sort that was obvious to the Tamils around the world. And you say the Canadian way of engaging worked. Could you tell us how... You were part of the government back then, so I'm asking you this question. Could you tell us how Canada engaged Sri Lanka at that time?
Well, there's a number of ways it worked. There was the giant protest in Ottawa got noticed. The protest on the Gardiner Expressway got noticed. But I think what was most powerful is that every politician thinks local. And so there was Tamil members of the community who went and met every member of Parliament. And so what happened was gradually people who may not have been aware of the subject got aware. We realized there's a big Tamil community in Scarborough and Markham, but it was the small groups of Tamils who lived in other places who went and spoke to their MPs and telling them their story that really moved mountains. I take my own example. I had 2 Tamil families in the city of Barrie, but it was a lady by the name of Ranji Sureshkumar crying on my couch that moved my heart. That's what we need to do. We need to make sure there's Tamils outside of Canada who are doing the same thing, whether it's with their MP or their congressman saying, this is what happened to my relatives. We need you to be our advocates, regardless of whether there's a Tamil community in your riding or not, because there is no geographical limitations on the duty to stand up against human rights abuses.
We're talking to Patrick Brown, Ontario PC Party leader, who was also a very strong advocate for the Tamils, has been an advocate and now promises to continue to be an advocate. Patrick, you're a good friend of the world's largest democracy's prime minister. Now, have you ever used that office to speak about the human rights abuses in Sri Lanka?
Yes, actually, a number of times. It's an interesting story. I can tell you, Raghavan, that I'm not sure is well known, but I obviously built a friendship there in India. I had been to India 15 times and got to know Narendra Modi when he was the chief minister of Gujarat. He actually made me an honorary citizen of the state back in 2011, we bonded over the years, and I was the one who was encouraging him to come to Canada for a visit, and I was asked to welcome him at the airport when he arrived in Canada, and joined the 2 prime ministers for their lunch together. And obviously, he did an event for me on my leadership campaign that I know a lot of the media took note of. But an interesting backstory is when I met him at the airport in Ottawa, we were talking about his arrival to Canada, and he said, Patrick, I hope you noticed that I went to Jaffna. So one of the very first things he told me was that he'd gone to Jaffna, and I told him that I was very proud to see that. I had mentioned to him before that there's a number of areas that Canada and India I thought could have common alliance, and I've talked about security being one, but one of the issues that I brought up to him a number of times, beyond our economic partnerships between Canada and India, and there's many that I'm excited about, the one issue that I flagged for him is that Canada and India could be a real partner on the issue of human rights abuses in Sri Lanka, and frankly, I have flagged the issue that there are other countries trying to exert geopolitical strength in Sri Lanka. I think that's well documented under the previous Rajapaksa regime, and this is an opportunity for a democracy, a friend of freedom in India, to play a leadership role in Sri Lanka. The fact that one of his very first trips as the new Prime Minister of India was to Jaffna, in my opinion, is significant.
Now, there's a pretty good chance, and in all fairness, in 2018, it appears that you have a good shot at becoming the Premier of Ontario. When that happens, do you have any plans of economic ties with Sri Lanka or even the Tamil portions of Sri Lanka?
Well, I would say I'm not sure what the status is going to be in Sri Lanka in 2018. I'm hesitant to do dealings with a government that still has on their record the inability to deal with the genocide. And so while I would be open to helping and aiding the Tamil community in Sri Lanka, I would be hesitant to deal with the criminals that are still in the Sri Lankan government. But the people connections, the relationship to relationship connections we can exert with the Tamil community still living in Sri Lanka is a very different matter.
Right. I asked that question because Toronto's Mayor John Tory made a promise during the election, and I think he is trying to make do of it, that he would make Jaffna a twin city to Toronto in efforts to empower the Tamil people there who've been ravaged by war. economically, and I figured with your strong ties to the Tamil community and to India, there is a prospect for Ontario to do the same, considering Ontario has the largest Tamil population outside of South Asia.
And I'd be open to those sort of relationships and friendships. A city-to-city relationship is one thing. If there's a region-to-region relationship that we can investigate, that's certainly something worth looking for. I think the idea of Toronto twinning with Jaffna is a wonderful idea, and good on my friend John Tory for suggesting that. I think that would have a lot of merit.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'm not trying to make you make policies on the fly. Going back to what we were talking about again, May 18th, you've been to a number of these events in the past, and it's a somber day for the Tamil community all around the world, remembering the thousands and thousands of people that were killed prematurely, dying young babies, and it's such a tragic scenario that every time you think about this, people start tearing up. What are your plans for this May 18th?
Well, this is, it is a day of remembrance, and it's a sad day because you are remembering a loss of life that was completely unneeded. It was a loss of life that was in proportions beyond modern comprehension, and I'm going to be attending a number of events around the GTA today to pay my respects, mm-hmm. to express my sympathy and solidarity with the community, that this is something that we're never going to forget. This is something we will never forget. And just like on November 11th, we remember those lives that were sacrificed during World War I and II. This is going to be something that we'll always have on May 18th every year to remember the enormous loss of life that occurred in Sri Lanka by act of genocide.
Patrick, you've been very kind in sharing some of your valuable time this morning with us. I'm going to reiterate one last thing, which is you've been such a strong voice for the Tamil people all around the world, right here in Canada, in the House of Commons, and now you're a leader of a provincial party, and we hope to see you continue that legendary work that you've done in this quest for some sort of reconciliation for the Tamil people, some sort of resolution for the Tamil grievances, and we hope to see you continue that great work that you do.
Thank you, Raghavan. A pleasure to be on your show.